I recall being in the vehicle driving up when he asked if I knew how to curtsy, and I honestly assumed he was joking. Meghan is certainly accustomed to royal theatrics, but this time the institution has maneuvered in total silence. Palace insiders corroborate that her royal standing has been quietly modified, and this alteration is sending tremors through Buckingham. A palace source cautions that this represents a major pivot, hinting at significant friction occurring behind closed doors. There was no proclamation and no fanfare, just a silent revision of the royal rulebook. The burning question on everyone's mind asks what this signifies for Meghan, for the monarchy, and for the narrative no one anticipated. Join us as we uncover the details of this quiet announcement. On a frigid December morning in 2024, something extraordinary occurred that the vast majority of people completely missed. While the globe was fixated on holiday preparations and end-of-year festivities, the official royal website underwent a modification so subtle that only the most devoted observers initially spotted it. However, this minute adjustment carried immense weight, and its implications were destined to ripple through the monarchy for years to come. The statement itself was nestled within a routine update to the royal family's official archives. There were no press briefings, no formal declarations, and no dramatic unveilings. It consisted of just a few carefully selected words on a web page that most individuals would never bother to read. Yet those words symbolized a seismic shift in how the palace perceived Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, and her position within the royal family hierarchy. What exactly was altered? The modification appeared bureaucratic and technical in its presentation. Meghan's designation on specific official documents had been quietly reclassified. Where she once possessed a specific status linking her directly to the working mechanisms of the monarchy, she was now listed in a category reserved for relatives who retain titles but operate wholly outside the institution's formal framework. It was the type of alteration that could easily be disregarded as administrative maintenance, but nothing the palace executes is ever truly simple or devoid of meaning. To grasp why this is significant, one must comprehend how the royal family actually functions behind the scenes. The monarchy is not merely about crowns and ceremonial events. It is a meticulously structured enterprise with clear hierarchies, defined roles, and specific privileges attached to distinct positions. Every member of the family exists within this framework, and where one sits in that structure dictates everything from income to security to the ability to represent the crown at official engagements. For years, even after Meghan and Harry retreated from royal obligations in 2020, a distinct ambiguity lingered regarding their standing. They retained their titles, they maintained certain connections, and there was always this unspoken potential that doors could reopen. There was a lingering thought that reconciliation could eventually bring them back into the fold in some capacity. This new classification eradicates that ambiguity entirely. It etches a line in the sand that has not been drawn previously. The timing of this announcement is particularly noteworthy. We are now nearly 5 years removed from the initial departure, often termed Megxit by the press. That is 5 years of interviews, documentaries, a best-selling memoir, and innumerable headlines. It has been 5 years of the family attempting to navigate this unprecedented situation while upholding their traditional image of unity and continuity. Now, as King Charles settles more firmly into his reign and looks toward the future of his monarchy, this decision implies a door has been permanently shut. Royal sources speaking on condition of anonymity, because they are unauthorized to discuss internal matters publicly, describe the decision as arriving after months of careful deliberation at the highest levels. This was not an impulsive reaction to any single event. It was a deliberate choice executed by individuals who understand that every action they take becomes part of the historical record. They knew precisely what they were doing when they enacted this change, and they knew exactly what message it would convey once people noticed. The initial reactions from within royal circles were mixed according to those in proximity to the situation. Some viewed it as a necessary step, a method of finally establishing clarity about who is included and who is excluded. After years of confusion and competing narratives, this provided definition. Others worried it might be perceived as retaliatory or punitive, particularly given the public sympathy Meghan has received from certain quarters regarding her treatment by the institution. What makes this particularly intricate is that it affects not just Meghan, but the entire dynamic of the Sussex family unit. When you alter one person's status within such a tightly interconnected system, ripples spread in every direction. Questions immediately arise regarding Harry's position, regarding their children Archie and Lilibet, and regarding what this signifies for any future interactions between the Sussexes and the working royals. For Meghan herself, wherever she was when this change was implemented, it must have represented a complicated moment. On one hand, she and Harry have constructed a life entirely separate from the royal family. They have their residence in California, their commercial ventures, their charitable work, and their private family life. They have made it clear they do not wish to be working royals, so in some ways this change simply formalizes a reality that already exists. But on the other hand, there is something deeply symbolic about having your status officially altered by an institution you were once part of. It is a statement, whether intended as such or not. It says that the door you walked through 5 years ago has now been locked behind you. There is no returning, no changing your mind, and no scenario where reconciliation brings you back into the formal structure of the monarchy. This is permanent. The question that everyone is now asking involves what comes next. How will Meghan respond? How will Harry navigate this new reality? And most importantly, what does this tell us about King Charles's vision for the future of the monarchy? To understand what this change truly signifies, you have to understand who Meghan Markle truly is beyond the headlines, the controversies, and the endless speculation. At the heart of this story is a real person with real feelings, real dreams, and a real journey that brought her to this impossible moment. Meghan is, by all accounts from those who knew her before she became a duchess, an incredibly warm and genuine individual. She is someone who illuminates a room when she enters, not because she is trying to command attention, but because she genuinely cares about the people around her. Friends from her acting days describe a woman who remembered birthdays, who checked in on people going through hard times, and who made everyone feel seen and valued. That was not a performance for the cameras. That was who she was. Her journey to becoming a working actress was not easy or overnight. Years of auditions and rejections taught her persistence. Small roles taught her craft, and eventually her work on a legal drama brought her a level of fame and financial security she had worked incredibly hard to achieve. By her mid-30s, she had built a life she was proud of. She had a successful career, a platform she used to advocate for causes she believed in, and a sense of purpose and independence. And then she met Harry. The story of how they met has been told many times, but what often gets lost in the fairy tale narrative is what she actually sacrificed. She was not some struggling actress looking for a prince to rescue her. She was a woman with her own identity, her own success, and her own voice. When she chose to pursue a relationship with Harry, she knew it would change everything. But like anyone falling in love, she believed it would be worth it. The promises that were made to her, both explicitly and implicitly, shaped her expectations of what royal life would be. She was told she would be supported. She was told the institution would shield her from the worst of the media scrutiny. She was told that her background in advocacy and public speaking would be assets to the family's work. She was told she could make a difference and could modernize the monarchy's approach to charity and public engagement. She believed these promises because they came from people she was learning to trust. Meghan is also deeply sensitive in the best sense of that word. She feels things intensely. When she witnesses injustice, it bothers her. When she is treated unfairly, it hurts her. When promises are broken, she experiences it as betrayal. Some people have criticized this sensitivity, suggesting she should have developed a tougher exterior or that she should have been able to weather the storms better. But sensitivity is not weakness. It is often the mark of someone who cares deeply and who engages authentically with the world around them. Her relationship with the institution of the monarchy was always going to be challenging. She came from a culture of directness, of speaking your truth, and of addressing problems head-on. The royal family operates on subtlety, on tradition, and on unspoken rules that everyone is somehow supposed to know without being taught. When she tried to navigate this new world, she sometimes stumbled because the guidebook was written in a language she had not fully learned yet. But here is what is important to understand about Meghan's character. She is someone who believes in loyalty and commitment. When she married Harry, she meant those vows. When she joined the royal family, she genuinely wanted to serve. The narrative that she was always planning to leave, or that she never took it seriously, or that it was all some calculated move for fame and fortune, does not match who she actually is as a person. She is also currently navigating motherhood with responsibilities that extend far beyond herself. Archie was born in 2019, just a year after her wedding, and Lilibet followed in 2021 after they had already stepped back from royal duties. Her entire understanding of what matters and what is worth fighting for has been shaped by wanting to protect her children. She wants to give them a childhood that is as normal and healthy as possible given their extraordinary circumstances. The journey from successful actress to duchess to whatever she is now has transformed her in ways both visible and invisible. She is tougher now, more guarded, and more careful about who she trusts. But she is also clearer about her values, more determined to live life on her own terms, and more willing to walk away from situations that compromise her integrity or her family's well-being. When people ask what this status change means to Meghan personally, they need to consider all of this context. This is not just about a title or a position on a website. It is about recognition, belonging, and whether the sacrifices she made were acknowledged or dismissed. It is about dignity and respect, and whether the institution she tried so hard to serve sees her as someone who walked away or as someone who was pushed out. And now, with this quiet change to her royal status, she faces yet another moment of definition. How she responds to this, and what it means for her sense of self and her future plans, will tell us so much about who she has become through all of this. Because titles and status can be changed by institutions, but who you are at your core is something only you control. Understanding why the palace made this decision now, at this particular moment in time, requires looking beneath the surface of official statements and polite protocols. Because the truth is that nothing happens in the royal family by accident. Every decision is calculated, every move is strategic, and this change to Meghan's status is no exception. The trigger for this decision was not any single event, but rather an accumulation of factors that reached a tipping point in late 2024. Palace insiders describe a growing sense among senior advisors that the ambiguity surrounding the Sussexes' position was becoming untenable. For nearly 5 years, the family had been operating in a gray area with Meghan and Harry technically still royal, but functionally completely separate. This lack of clarity was causing problems on multiple levels. First, there were the practical complications. Every time a major royal event approached, questions arose about whether the Sussexes would be invited, where they would sit if they attended, and what their role would be. The coronation in May of 2023 had highlighted these tensions perfectly. Harry attended alone while Meghan stayed in California with the children. The optics were awkward, the protocols unclear, and the whole situation reinforced how unsustainable the current arrangement had become. But the real catalyst came from something deeper and more personal. Behind closed doors, conversations were happening that revealed just how much strain this situation was placing on family relationships. King Charles, despite his complicated feelings about everything that had happened, is fundamentally a father who loves his son. He is also a king who must think about the institution he now leads and the legacy he will leave behind. These two roles were increasingly in conflict. The conversations Charles had with his most trusted advisors were reportedly intense and emotional. Some pushed for a harder line, arguing that the Sussexes had made their choice and the institution wanted to formalize that reality. Others advocated for maintaining flexibility, suggesting that circumstances could change and burning bridges completely would be a mistake. Charles listened to all perspectives, wrestled with the competing priorities, and ultimately made a decision that he believed served both his family and his duty. What many people do not realize is how much William's perspective influenced this outcome. As heir to the throne, William has significant input into decisions that affect the monarchy's future direction. His feelings about the Sussex situation are, by all accounts, more hardened than his father's. The relationship between William and Harry, once so close that they seemed inseparable, has deteriorated in ways that people who have known them since childhood find heartbreaking. William views what happened with Meghan and Harry through a lens shaped by his own understanding of duty and sacrifice. He is someone who gave up many aspects of normal life to prepare for his future role as king. He married someone who understood and accepted those sacrifices. When he sees his brother choosing a different path, choosing personal happiness over institutional obligation, it triggers something complicated in him. There is hurt, certainly, but also perhaps a hint of something resembling envy, though he would never admit it. Catherine, for her part, has tried to maintain a more measured approach. She is someone who understands the pressure of joining this family as an outsider. She knows what it is like to be scrutinized, to have every choice analyzed and criticized. In private conversations, she has reportedly expressed sympathy for what Meghan faced, even while disagreeing with how Meghan and Harry handled their departure. But Catherine also stands firmly beside her husband, and if William feels this formalization of separation is necessary, she supports him. The dynamic between these four people, William and Catherine on one side and Harry and Meghan on the other, has shaped so much of what has happened over the past 5 years. What started as two couples who might have complemented each other beautifully in service to the crown became instead a source of division and pain. The reasons are complex and probably impossible for any outsider to fully understand, but the impact on family relationships has been profound. Another factor that influenced this decision was the ongoing media situation. Despite living in California and being officially stepped back from royal duties, Harry and Meghan continue to generate headlines. Their Netflix documentary, Harry's memoir published in January of 2023, and their various interviews and public appearances all keep them in the conversation about the royal family. Some at the palace felt this created confusion, with the public unable to distinguish between official royal activities and the Sussexes' independent ventures. By formalizing Meghan's separate status, the palace was also sending a message about boundaries. They were saying, in effect, that whatever the Sussexes do going forward is entirely their business. But it is not royal business. It is a way of creating distance and protecting the institution from being implicated in or associated with choices and statements they have no control over. There is also a generational element to this decision. Charles is 76 years old, having waited longer than any heir in British history to become king. He is acutely aware of time and legacy. He wants to establish his reign on firm foundations, to modernize where appropriate, but also to maintain the essential character of the monarchy. This decision about Meghan's status fits into that larger vision. It is about defining boundaries and making clear what the monarchy is and isn't in the 21st century. Some close to the situation suggest that there was hope, perhaps naive hope, that formalizing this separation might actually ease tensions in the long run. By removing ambiguity and establishing clear boundaries, maybe it becomes possible to have family relationships that aren't constantly complicated by questions about roles and status. Maybe Harry can visit his father without it becoming a media spectacle about royal reconciliation. Maybe the children can know their cousins without every interaction being analyzed for political significance. But the reality is probably more complicated than that optimistic vision. Because changing someone's official status doesn't change the history that led to this point. It doesn't heal the wounds or rebuild the trust. It doesn't address the fundamental disagreements about what happened, who was at fault, and what should have been done differently. If anything, it might deepen the divide by making the separation feel more permanent and official. The hidden reasons behind this decision are ultimately about power, family duty, love, tradition, and change. They are about people trying to navigate impossible situations with no good answers, only choices that feel slightly less damaging than the alternatives. And they are about an institution that has survived for over 1,000 years, learning once again how to adapt to circumstances that challenge everything it thought it knew about itself. Let us start with what actually changed from a legal standpoint. Meghan remains the Duchess of Sussex. That title came to her through marriage and can only be removed through very specific legal processes that haven't been initiated. But her classification within the royal household structure has shifted. Where she was previously categorized in a way that maintains certain theoretical connections to official duties, she is now classified as a family member who holds a title but has no formal role within the institution. This distinction might sound minor, but it affects everything from who pays for what, to who makes decisions about her security, to whether she can use certain royal privileges. The technical language used in these classifications is deliberately obscure, designed to allow flexibility in interpretation while maintaining clear hierarchies. Meghan's new classification essentially places her in the same category as someone who married into the family generations ago and has long since stepped away from any active role. For her children, Archie and Lilibet, the implications are particularly complex. When Charles became king in September of 2022, Archie and Lilibet technically became entitled to use prince and princess titles as grandchildren of the monarch. This is governed by letters patent issued by King George V in 1917, which established the rules for who gets to be called His or Her Royal Highness. After months of speculation and some controversy about whether the children would be given these titles, it was announced in March of 2023 that they would indeed be known as Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. But here is where it gets complicated. Having a title doesn't automatically mean having a role. The children can be prince and princess while their mother's status has been formalized as separate from the working monarchy. These things are not necessarily connected in the legal framework. However, this change to Meghan's status does affect the children's future options. If Archie or Lilibet ever wanted to become working royals when they are older, they would face significant hurdles that children of working royals do not face. The path back into the institution has been made more difficult, perhaps intentionally so. It is a way of establishing that this branch of the family has chosen a different direction, and that choice has consequences that extend into the next generation. The question of security is another major legal reality affected by this change. When Harry and Meghan first stepped back from royal duties, there was a huge controversy about security arrangements in the UK. Working royals receive publicly funded police protection. When you are no longer working on behalf of the crown, that protection can be withdrawn. Harry has been fighting legal battles about this since 2020, arguing that he and his family face unique threats that justify special protection. Meghan's changed status strengthens the argument that the Sussexes are private citizens, not working royals, and therefore not entitled to the same security arrangements. This is not just about convenience or comfort. For people who have been in the public eye at their level, security concerns are real and serious. The legal framework around who gets protection and why is complex, but this status change makes it harder to argue they deserve special treatment. From a constitutional standpoint, there are also interesting questions about Meghan's relationship to the crown itself. The monarch is the head of state, and the working royals represent the crown in various capacities. By formalizing Meghan's position outside that working structure, the palace is clarifying that she doesn't represent the crown in any official capacity. Anything she does, any statement she makes, any cause she supports is entirely separate from the monarchy. This matters because it affects legal liability and association. If a working royal does something controversial, it can create constitutional issues. If someone who is clearly separate from the working monarchy does something controversial, it is their personal business. This protection works both ways. The monarchy is protected from being associated with the Sussexes' activities, and the Sussexes are freed from the restrictions that come with representing the crown. Looking at precedents in royal history provides some context for understanding this moment. The situation is not entirely unprecedented, though the specific circumstances are unique. When Princess Diana and Prince Charles divorced in 1996, Diana lost her HRH title but remained Diana Manuel, Princess of Wales. She was clearly no longer part of the working monarchy, though she maintained certain connections through her sons. The palace had to create a framework for someone who was the mother of a future king, but no longer married to the Prince of Wales. What is different about Meghan's situation is that she is still married to a prince. Harry retains his titles and his place in the line of succession. So we have a situation where a prince's wife has been formally categorized as outside the working monarchy, while the prince himself remains at least technically part of the royal family. This creates unusual legal questions about how they function as a couple in relation to the institution. The rights that Meghan retains are basically those of any British citizen, plus whatever privileges come from being married to Harry. She can live in the UK if she chooses, though she is currently based in California. She can use her Duchess title in any context where she finds it useful. She can attend family events if invited, but she has no right to represent the crown, no automatic claim to security, and no access to royal resources or funding. The legal reality of all this is ultimately about boundaries and definitions. The law likes clarity. It wants to know who is in and who is out, who represents the state and who is a private citizen, and who gets protection and who does not. By formalizing Meghan's status as outside the working monarchy, the palace has created legal clarity that didn't exist before. Whether that clarity serves everyone's interests equally is another question entirely. If this decision about Meghan's status is difficult for anyone, it is most difficult for Harry. Because he is the one person who exists in both worlds, who loves people on both sides of this divide, and who must somehow reconcile loyalties that increasingly feel incompatible. His position is not just complicated, it is genuinely impossible in ways that would break most people. Think about what this means for his marriage. Harry made a choice in 2020 to prioritize his wife and children over his royal role. That was not a decision he made lightly or impulsively. By all accounts, it came after months of anguish, after trying every possible way to make things work within the system, and after concluding that staying would damage his family in ways he couldn't accept. He chose Meghan, he chose their children, and he chose their well-being over everything else. Now, 5 years later, the institution he walked away from has formalized that separation by changing his wife's status. On one level, this shouldn't matter. They have already built a life in California, established their independence, and proven they can survive and even thrive outside the royal system. But on another level, this has to sting. It is a message from his family, from the institution his grandmother dedicated her life to, that they have moved on from Meghan in an official capacity. How does Harry process this? How does he explain it to his wife? Does he feel like he needs to defend his family's decision? Or does he share Meghan's sense of rejection? The conversations happening in their home in Montecito must be incredibly complex. Because even though they are united in their choices in their life together, this kind of institutional statement can test even the strongest partnerships. Friends of the couple suggest that Harry has become fiercely protective of Meghan in ways that have surprised even those who have known him longest. The fun-loving prince who once seemed carefree has transformed into someone intensely focused on shielding his wife and children from harm. Every slight against Meghan, every criticism, every institutional slight he feels personally. This status change, regardless of how it is officially framed, probably feels to Harry like his family rejecting the woman he loves. Charles, for his part, is said to be deeply saddened by how things have developed with Harry. He is a father who misses his son, who wishes he could see his grandchildren more, and who wants some kind of relationship even if it can't be what it once was. But he is also a king with institutional responsibilities that sometimes conflict with his personal desires. The private conversations between Charles and Harry have reportedly become more difficult as time goes on. Weighted with all the things they can't say, and the compromises neither feels able to make. Imagine being in one of those phone calls, Charles trying to explain why certain decisions were necessary from an institutional perspective, Harry trying to make his father understand the impact those decisions have on his family. Both of them probably wanting to say, "I love you, and I'm sorry, and I wish things were different," but unable to find the words or the moment. The sadness in those conversations must be overwhelming. Harry's loyalty is torn between two worlds in ways that create constant internal conflict. He was born into the royal family. He grew up understanding his role, his duty, and his place in a centuries-old institution. That identity was shaped over decades. You do not just turn that off because you moved to California. Part of him will always be Prince Harry, grandson of Queen Elizabeth II, son of the future king, and brother of the future king and after that. But he is also a husband and father whose primary loyalty is to the family he has created with Meghan. He has seen what the pressure and scrutiny did to his mother Diana, and he is determined not to let history repeat itself. He has watched his wife struggle with emotional burdens that he believes the institution failed to adequately address. He has made a choice about what matters most to him, and he stands by that choice. The problem is that these loyalties do not coexist peacefully. Every family event he misses is a reminder of what he has given up. Every milestone his children reach without knowing their grandfather well is painful. Every news story about William and Catherine doing royal duties that Harry once would have shared probably triggers complicated feelings. He chose to leave, yes, but that does not mean the leaving does not hurt. There are reports that Harry has tried, especially in the months following the Queen's passing in September of 2022, to find some middle ground. He sought some way to have a relationship with his family without compromising the boundaries he and Meghan established for their own well-being. But middle ground is hard to find when you are dealing with an institution that operates in absolutes, that struggles with ambiguity, and that needs clear answers about who is in and who is out. The choice Harry faces now, in light of this change to Meghan's status, is whether to accept this as the final word on their relationship with the monarchy or to push back in some way. Does he call his father and express anger or hurt? Does he release a statement through his representatives? Does he simply accept it as confirmation of what they already knew, that the bridge back has been permanently burned? Some who know Harry well suggest he has reached a point of acceptance about all this, that he has made peace with the fact that he can't have both the family relationships he wants and the independent life he has chosen, that he is focused on moving forward rather than trying to repair what might be irreparable. But acceptance does not mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean there aren't moments when he wonders what might have been different if they had tried harder to make it work, or if the institution had been more flexible, or if the media had been less brutal. There is also the question of what example he is setting for his children. Archie is now 5 years old enough to start understanding that his family is different, that his grandfather is the king, and that his uncle will be king one day. How does Harry explain to his son why they don't see that family very often? How does he frame the choices he has made in ways that Archie can understand and respect as he gets older? The weight of all this on Harry must be enormous. He is essentially living in a state of permanent grief for the family relationships that used to exist and can't exist in the same way anymore. He is navigating the guilt that sometimes comes with choosing your own happiness over duty. He is managing Meghan's feelings and his children's needs while processing his own complicated emotions about all of it. The question that haunts him, that probably keeps him awake some nights, is whether he made the right choice. He believes he did. He had to protect Meghan and his children. But believing you made the right choice doesn't make it painless. It doesn't resolve the impossible position of loving people on both sides of a divide that seems to grow wider with every passing year. So where does this leave us? The palace has made its move, formalizing Meghan's position outside the working monarchy. The decision has been made, the change implemented, and the new reality established. But in many ways, the most important questions are still ahead of us. How will the people involved respond? What does this mean for the future? And what happens to relationships that are already strained to the breaking point? Meghan's response to this change will tell us a lot about where she is emotionally and what her priorities are now. She has several options available to her, each with different implications. She could stay silent, refusing to acknowledge the change publicly and simply continuing to build her life in California. This would be the dignified approach, the one that suggests she has moved beyond needing validation from an institution that she has already left behind. Alternatively, she could address it directly, perhaps through an interview or a statement. She could frame it as confirmation of what she already knew, that the door was never really open for her return. She could use it as an opportunity to share more of her perspective on what happened and why. But this approach risks reigniting the media frenzy that has surrounded her for years, and it is unclear whether that serves her interests at this point. Those close to Meghan suggest she is focused on forward movement rather than looking back. She and Harry have built business ventures, including their production company and various media deals. She has been working on projects related to women's empowerment and social justice issues she cares about. Her life is full and purposeful in ways that don't depend on royal status. From that perspective, this change might be something she can absorb without feeling the need to respond publicly. But there is also the personal dimension. Even if Meghan has intellectually moved beyond caring about her royal status, this kind of official rejection can still hurt. It is a statement from an institution she tried to serve, tried to be part of, and tried to contribute to. Having that institution formally categorize her as outside its structure might feel like a final judgment on her worthiness, her value, and her place in the story. For the royal family, the question is whether this formalization of separation actually achieves what they hoped. Does it create the clarity and distance they wanted, or does it just provide fuel for more controversy, more headlines, and more discussion about the rifts in the family? The palace's strategy of making the change quietly suggests they hope to avoid drama. But hope and reality don't always align when it comes to the Sussexes. The future of Harry and Meghan's royal connection is now more defined than it has been since they stepped back in 2020. They can attend family events if invited, but they won't have any official role. They can maintain their titles, but those titles don't come with institutional support or responsibilities. They are family members, but not working royals. This clarity might actually make their lives easier in some ways, removing the ambiguity that has plagued them for years. Their public life will likely continue to evolve away from anything royal adjacent. They have been building their brand as independent advocates, content creators, and public figures who happen to have royal backgrounds, rather than as royals who happen to have outside interests. This status change accelerates that evolution, making it clearer that whatever they do is separate from the monarchy. But there is a paradox here. The more the palace tries to separate the Sussexes from the institution, the more the public becomes fascinated by that separation. Every move that is meant to create distance actually generates more interest, more speculation, and more stories. The palace can change Meghan's official status, but they can't change the fact that she married a prince, and that makes everything about her newsworthy to large segments of the public. How this changes things for William and Catherine is another important question. They have been positioned as the stable, dutiful alternative to Harry and Meghan's dramatic departure. William has been preparing for his future role as king, and that preparation has accelerated since Charles took the throne. This clarification about Meghan's status reinforces the narrative that William and Catherine represent the future of the monarchy, while Harry and Meghan are an interesting but ultimately separate story. But does this decision make reconciliation between the brothers more or less likely? Some argue that establishing clear boundaries actually makes family relationships easier because everyone knows where they stand. Others suggest that every formalization of the separation makes the emotional distance harder to bridge. The truth is probably that the relationship between William and Harry is so complicated and so damaged that this institutional change is just one more factor in an equation that was already nearly impossible to solve. For Archie and Lilibet, growing up with the knowledge that their parents' relationship with the royal family is formally distant will shape their identities in significant ways. They are being raised primarily in California in a very different environment from their cousins in the UK. They have prince and princess titles, but what do those titles actually mean for children being raised outside the monarchy? How will they understand their heritage and their family history? The question that no one really wants to answer, the significant issue that everyone tiptoes around, is whether this separation is truly permanent. Is there any scenario in which Meghan and Harry return to the UK and resume some kind of role within the royal family? Is there any path to reconciliation that doesn't require someone to completely surrender their position? The honest answer is that it seems increasingly unlikely. Too much has been said, too much damage done, and too many bridges burned. Harry's memoir, published in January of 2023, included revelations about private family matters that reportedly left William furious and Charles deeply hurt. The Netflix documentary, aired in December of 2022, showed the couple's perspective on their departure in ways that the family felt were unfair and one-sided. Every public statement, every interview, and every project has added layers of complication to relationships that were already struggling. But families are complicated. People change and circumstances evolve. The death of Queen Elizabeth in 2022 was a moment that could have brought the family together, and to some extent it did briefly. Future events, whether celebrations or tragedies, might create other moments of potential connection. The question is whether anyone involved has the willingness and emotional capacity to seize those moments and try to rebuild. What happens next will depend partly on choices made by the people directly involved and partly on circumstances beyond anyone's control. If Charles's health becomes a concern, that could shift dynamics. If something happens that affects the children, that could create new urgency around family reconciliation. If public opinion shifts dramatically in one direction or another, that could influence how the palace and the Sussexes approach their relationship. The most likely scenario is that things continue roughly as they are, separate lives on separate continents, occasional family events that bring them into the same space with carefully managed interactions, and public statements that maintain polite distance while avoiding direct conflict. It is not a satisfying ending to the story, but it might be the most realistic one. For Meghan, this formalization of her status outside the working monarchy is probably both a relief and a loss. A relief because it removes ambiguity and allows her to fully commit to the life she and Harry have built. A loss because it represents the final closing of a door that once seemed to lead to a different future. A future where she could have served and contributed and been accepted as part of an ancient and storied institution. The real question, the one that time will ultimately answer, is whether everyone involved can find peace with the choices that have been made. Can Harry reconcile his love for his family with his commitment to his wife and children? Can William and Charles accept that Harry's path is different from theirs without feeling it as a personal betrayal? Can Meghan move forward without bitterness about what might have been? Can the institution evolve to accommodate different kinds of relationships with family members who choose unconventional paths? These are not easy questions, and they do not have easy answers. But they are the questions that will define the next chapter of this ongoing story, regardless of what any official statement or status change might say.